Okay, today we're going to walk through our first set of video notes for Unit 1, which is on squares and square roots. We're going to talk about what is a square number and how do we find the square root of a square number. So let's go ahead and get started. You should have your note sheet out in front of you. Okay, all your note sheets, everyone should have this note sheets, and on top of your paper it should say squares and square roots video notes. So all the notes, the video notes are going to be similar to this. You'll have a half sheet of paper, sometimes it might be bigger, and this is what you're going to record your notes on. So we're going to start up here at the top at the first 10 perfect squares. But before we do that, I want to talk about what a perfect square is. And a perfect square is any number that is a result of multiplying two numbers together that are exactly the same. So I'll go up here. So for example, if I have 2 times 2, I get 4. So 4 is called a perfect square because these two numbers are exactly the same. So if we multiply 1 times 1, we get 1, so 1 is a perfect square. 4 is a perfect square because it's 2 times 2. 3 times 3 is 9, so 9 is a perfect square. 4 times 4 is 16. 5 times 5 is 25. 6 times 6 is 36. 7 times 7 is 49. 8 times 8 is 64. 9 times 9 is 81. And 10 times 10 is 100. And we can keep on going. So all these numbers are perfect squares because they have a set of factors that are exactly the same. So for example, if we looked at the factors of 4, we can have 1 times 4 and we can have 2 times 2. This is what makes it a perfect square because those factors are the same. Unlike if we had 6, we could have 1 times 6 and 2 times 3. It doesn't have any factors that are the same. This factor pair, both numbers are different, and this factor pair, both numbers are different. So 6 is not a perfect square. So how do we square a number? We square a number by multiplying. It just means to multiply a number by itself. So you multiply a number by itself. So it has to have two identical factors. And so for example, if I multiply 3 times 3, I get 9. So 9 is on our list of perfect squares right here. Square root. Square root is the opposite of squaring a number. So square root is the opposite of squaring a number. It undoes a squaring. So let's go back to our example of the square root of 9. You have to think about what two numbers can I multiply together to get 9 that are exactly the same. Well, I can use 1 and 9, but 1 and 9 aren't exactly the same. But I can also use 3 and 3. So what number did I multiply by itself to get 9? The number I multiplied by itself was 3. So the square root of 9 is equal to 3. So the easiest problems, square root problems, are from perfect squares. That's why we have our list up there. We can square root numbers that aren't perfect squares, like 5, but then it gets kind of ugly and complicated, and we'll work on that later in the class. So if it has two identical factors, you need to think twins. Think identical twins. That means they have two identical factors. So in example 1, we're going to look at 25. If we want to take the square root of 25, and that's what this little symbol right here means, that's square root, the square root of 25 is 5, because if we multiply 5 times 5, we get 25. But what two other numbers can we multiply together to get 25? Well, we can also multiply -5 times -5. So the square root of 25 is also -5 because -5 times -5 also equals 25. So we squared these two identical factors. 5 times 5 equals 25. Two identical factors, negative 5 times negative 5 equals 25. So I'm going to pause the video for a second and have you go ahead and do example 2. We want to find the square root of 81. So I'm going to stop the video, go ahead on your paper and find the square root of 81. What two numbers can I multiply together that are exactly the same that will give me 81? Okay, so let's check our paper. The square root of 81 is 9, because 9 times 9 equals 81. And the square root of 81 is also negative 9, because negative 9 times negative 9 is also 81. So we're going to go ahead and work on these questions down here. It says identify the square roots of the following perfect squares. Now I know that 16 is a perfect square, one because it's on my list, but it has two identical factors. So the square roots of 16, there's 2. The square roots of 16 are 4, because 4 times 4 is 16, and negative 4, because negative 4 times 4 is 16. So that means if I square 4, 4 squared and negative 4 squared both equal 16. Okay, I'm going to stop the video, go ahead and do 49. What two numbers that are exactly the same can I multiply together to get 49? And I can multiply negative 7 and 7, because negative 7 squared is 49 and 7 squared is 49. And negative 7 squared just means negative 7 times negative 7, and 7 squared means 7 times 7. Okay, so if we do square root on the calculator, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second, there's a nice pretty button on it. When we find the square root on a calculator, the calculator is only going to give us the positive answer. It's not going to give us the negative answer. So to find square root on the calculator is only going to give us the positive square root. This number is called the principal square root. So the calculator is only going to give us the positive one. We just have to remember to put down the negative one. If the problem is asking for the negative square root of a number, it will look like the negative square root of 81. And that would be negative 9. If the number is asking for both the positive and negative number, it will look like this. It will be plus minus the square root of 81. And that means that our answer can be a positive 9 and our answer can be a negative 9. Okay, so if we look at these examples 1 and 2 right here, these are both asking us for the negative square root of a number. So we just leave the negative on the outside. And the square root of 10 is 10, so we just have to write, the square root of 100 is 10, so we just have to write negative 10. Number 2, same thing, is negative. The square root of 64 is 8, so our answer is negative 8. That's it. If we're looking for both square roots, it's going to have the plus minus out front. So this means I know that the square root of 49 is 7, but it can be a positive 7. And it can also be a negative 7, because 7 times 7 is 49, and negative 7 times negative 7 is 49. And the same thing for number 2 on the second set of examples. We're looking for the negative and the positive. The square root of 9 is 3. You can write it as 3 or as a plus 3. And it is also negative 3, because 3 times 3 is 9, and negative 3 times negative 3 is 9. Okay, 2 more types of equations and then we will move on to the classwork. So, we need to solve for x squared. I want to know what number for x can I multiply by itself 2 times that will give me 144. So I said in the notes up above, to undo a squaring is to take the square root. So I can do the square root of both sides. So if we do the square root of x squared has to equal the square root of 144. These guys cancel and I'm left with x. So what two numbers can I multiply together to get 144? Well, we went as far as 110 times 10, so over here we'll have to try it out. We'll see if 11 times 11 is 144, and this gives us 11, placeholder 11, this gives us 121, so 11's not going to work. So then if we do 12 times 12, 2 times 12 is 24, 1 times 12 is 12, and this gives us 144. So x can equal 12. It can also equal negative 12. So we're not going to be using a calculator right away, so the guess and check method is the easiest method to go. And then our last example, y squared equals 16 over 25. It doesn't matter what this variable is right here, whether it's y, x, a, b, c. We're going to do it the same way we did the last example, but this one is a fraction, so it just looks a little different. So we can do the same thing. We can take the square root of y squared, and then we can take these two apart. 16 is a perfect square, so I can figure out what's the square root of 16 and what's the square root of 25. And we're going to leave these as positive. The square root of 16 is 4, because 4 times 4 is 16, and the square root of 25 is 5. So y is equal to 4/5. Last question I want to think about is negative numbers have no real square roots. So the question is, how come I can't take the square root of negative 9? Why won't that work? We're looking for two numbers we can multiply together to get negative 9 that are exactly the same. So we'll just think about that for a minute and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so here is the second part of your notes, should be on the back of your sheet. Squares and cube roots. I don't know if there's any cube roots on here. Nope, this one is just square roots. So we're going to find the two values for the square root of 81. So we'll do example 1 together. Okay, what are the two square roots of 81? So we'll do the square root of 81. And we know it is 9 because 9 times 9 is 81, and also negative 9 because negative 9 times 9 is 81. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to go over questions 2 through 10, and we'll go over them together when we're finished. So find the two values for the square root of 16. Number 3, what two numbers can I multiply together to get 100? What two numbers can I multiply together to get 144? What two numbers can I multiply together to get 225, and so forth.